Alright, so this is the Abxylute 3D one, and it's a $1,800 Windows handheld gaming PC that can also turn into a tablet, laptop, gaming PC, or console. And the main selling point that Abxylute is promoting is that it's got glasses-free 3D. You can use a switch on the top here to turn on 3D mode for basically any compatible game you're seeing on screen. Now, Abxylute is a tiny, relatively new company, and I've covered their budget streaming focused handhelds before on this channel. So yeah, you can tell that this big 3D tank is a big swing for them. I'm not gonna lie, 3D is a really weird focus right now, especially right now in 2025, since 3D kind of died like 10 years ago. But because this is basically an all-in-one and it's actually decent at doing a lot of the non-3D things, this is a very weird yet interesting product. Now, even though the Abxylute 3D one is tough for me to recommend to most people, I have been having a really good time with this. First off, this thing is huge, like too big. It's even hard to call this a handheld. It's got an 11-inch display with a build that's super thick with controllers on each side. If you thought the Steam Deck or other handhelds were thick and big, this will actually make those seem more portable. Now, thankfully, it's got an integrated kickstand that's adjustable and it's actually really solid in how it's implemented. Surprisingly, it's actually not that heavy at 1.1 kilograms, so it is pretty manageable to have as a handheld and play games for like short periods of time. But in reality, you will mostly only play it at home on a desk or on a pillow, and a few other places where you know you'll be playing in a stationary spot for a while, or maybe as a gaming PC setup where you only sometimes take it off the desk. But because it's so big, it's got a ton of space for components and it's really capable. That huge 11-inch display is a 2.5K 120Hz LCD, and it's actually a really good one. The colors look great and it's high resolution too, so it doesn't feel like they're cheaping out at all on the display. I do feel like it doesn't get that bright, maxing out at 480 nits, but for playing games at home, this is more than serviceable. The speakers are downward facing and they're not great. They sound a bit tinny. You definitely won't be able to get a theater-like experience, but it's not bad enough to complain about. Plus, you can also just use wired or wireless headphones or even speakers, so you have your options. The controls are also really well done. I love the shoulder and ABXY buttons. There's these customizable rear buttons. The 8-way D-pad is great for fighting games. The Hall Effect analog sticks are grippy and tuned nicely as well. The touchpads aren't haptic clickable or pressable like what you can find on the Steam Deck. You're just able to swipe and touch on it, but this is also well done. It's accurate enough and is basically a must-have when navigating throughout Windows. The backsides of the controllers are actually really ergonomic and very comfortable to hold, so it's a weird balance of a huge size with decent ergonomics. I would only say that the triggers don't feel as precise or as high quality as those on mainstream consoles, but they're still good and very responsive. Plus, these are detachable and you can dock it in this controller bridge to make a wireless controller, which is awesome. It also works like a remote without the bridge, so these controllers are kind of like the ultra versions of the Nintendo Switch Joy-Cons. There's not too much RGB either, just some lights around the analog sticks, and I like the minimal Stormtrooper look. The port selection up at the top here is pretty full featured. You get a UHS 2 microSD slot, an audio jack, a Thunderbolt 4 Type-C port, a USB-A, and a non-Thunderbolt USB-C port. You can get display output and data transfer with either the USB-C ports. It's just that the Thunderbolt is much faster and you can even connect external GPUs, so you're better off using that if you're connecting anything. With a monitor or TV attached, this is basically a desktop PC or a console, so there's just a ton of flexibility here. The 3D one even comes with a detachable keyboard, and since this runs on Windows, this is also just a laptop that runs any software or apps you need on the daily. By the way, the keyboard is actually pretty good for typing. It was comfortable for me and fast to type on right out of the box, so it was easy to get used to pretty quickly. I don't like the diveboard trackpad much for clicking, so you can only click on the bottom here, but for multi-touch and gestures, it's decent. And if it's good at those things, it's also going to be good for keyboard and mouse gaming too, so that's covered there. Of course, this is a touchscreen, so it's also a really thick tablet too that you can use for watching anything you want. Windows still isn't that good for touch gestures, but the touch responsiveness is really well done here, and typing and swiping on the 3D one is not a bad experience at all. But the main reason I say that the Abxylute 3D one is so capable is all the internals inside. It's got an Intel Core Ultra 7 with Intel Arc Graphics 140V, which has 16 gigs of VRAM. It only comes with a single config of 32 gigs of LPDDR5 RAM and a 1TB of PCIe SSD. Now for the price tag, I'm glad the memory and storage are more than well covered. By turning on performance mode, which is always recommended when gaming, you can get a sustained power level of 30 watts and even reach a turbo power level of 50 watts. You're also able to turn on the fan boost to better sustain all that power, and you do get noticeable improvements with this on. As you can tell, the fan boost is really loud. You can even hear the fan noise through the mic right here. So I do recommend wearing headphones or having some loud speakers if you do have fan boost mode on. You can hear these fans almost all the time anyway, whatever you're doing, so if you want a more quiet non-gaming session with this, you'll want to be on quiet mode. Now in terms of just the raw power compared to other handhelds, it's much more powerful than the Steam Deck OLED and is right up there with the top tier of handhelds like the ROG Xbox Ally X. The only PC that really beats the specs here is the GPD Win 5. But so far, this thing was able to run whatever I throw at it. Seriously, I can smoothly run everything I have in my library and they all launch quickly too. I can play Shadow of the Tomb Raider at 1080p with basically the highest settings and it looks awesome and smooth with at least 60 frames per second. Same with GTA 5 Enhanced Edition, I'm playing with high settings and everything runs super smoothly at around 50 FPS. Personally, this is the best I've ever seen GTA look before, so that's been super fun. Of course, for the more demanding games like Hogwarts Legacy, I had to lower the settings down to medium settings to get a more consistent 40 to 50 frames per second. And for the games that just aren't well optimized for Intel Arc graphics like Marvel Rivals, you're going to be seeing some punishing performance with not the best FPS, but this sort of case has been rare so far in all my playthroughs. But for everything else I tried, I was able to run them at 1080p 60 frames or higher with at least medium to high graphics settings. And here's what some of these other games look like.
Oh, Jesus. Oh, my spine.
Look, tire tracks.
Look at why you bleed from... Try to get me! Bother to remember!
And I just want to add that even though Windows feels really dumb with a controller and a touchscreen because it's not really optimized for either, it's a full desktop environment, I do have to say that it's nice knowing that every program and app I install on here will just run. Every anti-cheat program will run, so every multiplayer game will just work here, and there's also no emulation or translation layers you need to deal with because this is just x86 or x64 Windows. By the way, with this much horsepower and running full-fledged Windows, even creatives can rely on this for photo and video editing, so this handheld is really capable and it can be someone's main PC. So next, let's talk about how weird this 3D part is. Well, Abxylute provides custom software, a launcher, and an updated list of games that are natively optimized for 3D and also AI 2D to 3D conversions. Even though software is usually the weakest part of Abxylute's products, I actually do like the very small touches they did here. The launcher is easy to use and is a central location for all your games and other third-party launchers. And the quick menu is actually really accessible by clicking this button on the left here. It pops up instantly and you can activate it anywhere or whatever you're doing. It's really helpful if something crashes and you can just launch up the task manager. Now the 3D is easy to turn on at any time thanks to the physical switch up at the top here. And the 2D to 3D transition is actually really fast. Even though that is the case, there is a huge performance dip even for native optimized games. You have to lower the graphics settings by a ton to get this 3Ds to work for any game that you try. Every game I tried has to be lowered to the lowest settings in order to get playable frame rates. Anything higher than low settings just looks too choppy. Also, the software is a bit finicky about this too because you need to maintain the max resolution for the display and for the game itself in order to make this work. If you do change the resolution, the 3D feature just won't work. So ironically, to get the best out of this experience, it's really best to only use this for the least demanding titles like 2D indies or very old AAA titles. It's cool how it works since it tracks your eyes and sort of shifts perspective to match you. Now you still have to be in a specific distance and center position in front of the handheld in order to see the 3D really properly, so this part is a bit inconvenient. But I do think the biggest issue is that even everything running as well as it could and the 3D is working as intended, it also honestly doesn't look that 3D. As you kind of move around and shift your POV, you can see the foreground character models and the UI elements popping out a little bit, and you can see more depth in the background, but it's really nothing too crazy. It seems just about as 3D or maybe even less 3D than what the Nintendo 3DS used to be. And honestly, I rarely ever used the feature on the 3DS when I had it. Now it's cool that they're able to pull this off and that Abxylute has a way to easily turn on and off this glasses-free 3D effect, but it's just not a differentiating factor for me, and I kind of wish that they didn't focus their marketing around the 3D feature because this thing is actually pretty good at playing games and some of the other stuff. Now, as for the battery life, you can pretty much just forget about it. It's got a 50 watt-hour battery inside. It's not a bad size, but also this thing is huge, so it sort of evens out. For most games I've played, from older AAA titles to newer ones, the battery life is only going to last you an hour to an hour and a half at best. Like I said, this thing is huge. You're only going to be playing this on stationary surfaces, and you're also going to be playing this plugged in too. Now, let's say you do use this like a laptop on some days with quiet mode on. The battery life is better, but nothing that impressive. You'll only get about 3 to 4 hours of actual usage at best. So even when not playing games, you can't really rely on the battery much without a charger. More importantly, I do have to mention that this is a very expensive device from a very small company. And from my experience with Abxylute's previous handhelds, the attention to detail on the small stuff and also the software updates aren't really their strengths. Thankfully, this is just Windows and you don't really need to rely on Abxylute much for the software besides the firmware and custom UI. And for a pre-production review model from a small company, this has been a really stable experience. So my only main concerns are long-term reliability and also getting support from their team. They have made things a lot more accessible with their Discord page, but it is a risk you have to make as a consumer if you buy from a company of this size. But my bigger worries are about the small quality control issues that I ran into with this pre-production review unit. The backplate seems to be slightly lifted and I can sort of push it back in, but it does pop out from time to time. The magnetic part of the keyboard is also coming apart slightly. Now, Abxylute has assured me that they've never run into this issue from any other reviewer and that this is a pre-production review model and that retail units won't face this issue, but I did want to be transparent about it because I did run into it. Now, all in all though, besides the weird 3D part, I actually think the Abxylute 3D one is a great idea. It's essentially a powerful gaming PC that can be a handheld, a tablet, a console, and even a laptop. The games play really well and I love the general hardware. Dollar for dollar, I do think you get more value out of this than something like a spec'd out Surface Pro. You get the tablet, the controls, a keyboard, all the ports, and the powerful internals. But with this being Abxylute's first major flagship handheld gaming PC, it is a big risk on the consumer to buy something so expensive from them. I honestly feel like if they made a more focused product that's good at all these other things, made it a little more affordable, and not focus any of their marketing or the feature set on the 3D at all, this would be a much better received product. So for $1,800 from a relatively unknown brand, it's hard for me to make the recommendation to most people, but personally, I have been having a good time with this, and for those of you that have been looking for an all-in-one gaming handheld like this is one of the very few options out there. Alright, so those are all my thoughts. Let me know in the comments what you think of the Abxylute 3D one. Make sure to subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next video.